Welcome back to the space where we keep it real, raw, and relatable. If you've ever felt like you're giving too much, chasing too hard, or constantly proving your worth to a woman who doesn't see your value, then this one is for you. Today, we're diving into the powerful psychology of presence, mystery, and self-worth, and how flipping the script can make her truly afraid to lose you. This isn't about manipulation. This is about standing in your power as a man, about becoming someone whose absence speaks louder than your words. So if you're tired of being overlooked, if you're ready to become unforgettable, stay with me. Let's talk psychology, strategy, and self-respect. Let's get into it. Women don't fear losing a man they know they've already figured out. That's the truth most men don't want to hear, but it's where the power begins. When someone feels they've already seen every part of you, when they believe they can predict your every move, when they feel no more surprises, no depth left to explore, they start to emotionally detach. Certainty, while comforting in small doses, becomes dangerous when it kills curiosity. The human mind is drawn to what it can't fully grasp, to what stays just out of reach. That's where desire grows, that's where attraction deepens. If you show up in the same way every single time, if your emotions, your intentions, your actions are always on display with no restraint, she will subconsciously put you into a box that no longer excites her. That's how you go from being someone she couldn't wait to talk to someone she slowly starts ignoring. Think about it. What keeps people coming back to a series, a mystery, a novel? It's the unknown, the unanswered questions, the layers that haven't been peeled back yet. When you give too much too soon, when you lay all your cards on the table emotionally, mentally, even physically, you strip away the thrill of the chase. You become easy to understand, easy to decode, and in that ease there's a loss of value. Not because you're not worthy, but because you didn't protect your essence, your mystery, your individuality. Mystery doesn't mean being fake, it doesn't mean playing games, it means having depth. It means being a man who doesn't reveal everything in the first conversation, who isn't always available, who doesn't feel the need to constantly prove his worth or beg for attention. It's in how you speak, how you move, how you listen more than you talk. It's in how you don't need to fill every silence. You let her wonder, you let her guess, you let her feel unsure, not in a toxic way, but in a way that shows her you're not trying to be owned, solved, or controlled. Mystery is about subtle tension. It's about being present but unpredictable. She doesn't know if today you'll call or if you'll be focused on your grind. She doesn't know exactly how much you care, not because you're hiding it, but because you're not performing it. You let your presence speak louder than forced words. You become intentional with your energy, and in doing so, you awaken something in her that most men never do. The primal fear of not knowing where she stands. And that fear creates a chase. That uncertainty becomes a magnet. The reason so many men lose power in relationships is because they hand it over too quickly. They confuse openness with oversharing, availability with desperation. But when a woman knows your next move, when she can read your reactions like a book she's already read 10 times, her emotional investment starts to wither. She may still respect you, she may still care, but she won't feel that burning desire. She won't feel that tension that keeps her thinking about you late at night. That energy, that tension, comes from holding back just enough to make her lean in. It's about pacing the emotional rhythm. It's about being aware that attraction thrives in space, in curiosity, in layers she still wants to uncover. When a man understands this, everything changes. His conversations become more powerful. His presence becomes more magnetic. He no longer feels the need to overshare or overcompensate. He realizes that being figured out too quickly is a curse in connection. Because the more someone has to guess, the more they have to engage, the more they lean in, the more they invest. The moment you stop chasing and start attracting, she feels the shift, and that shift triggers fear of loss. There's something deeply psychological about the energy you bring into a relationship. When you're in chase mode, constantly calling, texting, planning, apologizing, checking in, proving, convincing, what you're really doing is signaling that you are more invested than she is. And while that might seem like dedication to the female psyche, it often comes off as desperation. The human brain is wired to assign higher value to things that are harder to get. When you're always available, always responding instantly, always the first one to reach out, it lowers your perceived value. Not because you're not valuable, but because your behavior suggests you don't believe you are. Chasing puts her in control. It flips the dynamic. It tells her that your emotional stability depends on her validation, that her attention is your fuel. And once she senses that, once she knows she can have you anytime, anywhere, on her terms, the mystery disappears. The respect fades, the energy collapses. She might not even be aware of it, but her instincts start to shift. She starts testing you, pulling away slightly, just to see if you'll panic. And if you do, if you chase even harder, you're confirming what she already suspects. You need her more than she needs you. But the moment you stop chasing, the entire energy flips. Suddenly, you're not sending 3 texts in a row. You're not checking if she saw your story. You're not available every time she calls. You're not rushing to fix something that hasn't even broken. Instead, you become grounded. You become focused on your own life, your goals, your mission, and she feels that. Even in silence, she notices. It's in the delayed response. It's in the missed call. It's in the way you no longer initiate every interaction. And now, instead of feeling pursued, she starts feeling uncertain. She starts wondering why the energy has changed. She begins to feel that shift, and that shift makes her nervous. When a woman feels the balance of emotional investment tilt away from her, when she's no longer sure where she stands, her survival instincts get activated. It's no longer about games or romance. It's about loss aversion, the deeply embedded fear that she's losing something of value. And when that fear kicks in, she starts thinking more about you. She becomes more emotionally present. She texts first, she reaches out, she starts giving more effort. Why? Because now she feels that your attention is not guaranteed. Your presence is not permanent. You've stopped chasing, and now she's starting to pursue. This doesn't mean you become cold or distant. It means you become selective, intentional. You're not emotionally withdrawing to punish her. You're simply reclaiming your power. You're no longer a man who puts someone on a pedestal just because of beauty or charm. You're a man who understands that value comes from within, and that chasing only makes you look like you don't see your own worth. When you stop chasing, you stop seeking approval, you stop needing constant reassurance. You start moving like a man who knows his time and energy are gifts, not something to be thrown around to anyone willing to take it. And she notices, she feels it in the space you create, in the way you no longer validate her every move. In the calm, grounded energy you now carry, and it starts to make her question things she never questioned before. She wonders what you're thinking. She wonders why you're so composed. She wonders if she's slipping away from your mind. That wondering, that curiosity, that psychological tension, that's what starts the process of attraction all over again. Not because you tried to manipulate it, but because you finally started acting like a man who doesn't need to chase what already belongs to him by nature. Emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's power. It's one of the most misunderstood yet most powerful tools a man can develop. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling, caring, or loving. It means you stop being ruled by those feelings. It means you stop reacting impulsively, stop trying to control outcomes, and stop giving power to temporary emotions. When a man learns to detach emotionally, he becomes a force of nature, calm, centered, unmoved by drama, unshaken by tests. He becomes the type of man who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and doesn't break under pressure. That kind of energy changes everything. Especially in relationships, most men are trained to think that being emotional equals being vulnerable, and being vulnerable equals being attractive. But vulnerability without self-control is just emotional chaos. If you're constantly reacting, constantly oversharing, constantly trying to explain yourself or prove your worth, it sends a message that you're not grounded. And women pick up on that. A woman can sense emotional instability from miles away. It shows in your tone, your words, your need for reassurance, your panic when she pulls away even slightly. That neediness, that emotional volatility, kills attraction at its root. When you are emotionally detached, you operate from a place of internal validation. You are no longer chasing her reactions or her affection. You're not texting just to see if she still cares. You're not overthinking every silence or misreading every tone. You're not obsessing over what she said or what she didn't say. Instead, you observe. You respond when necessary, and you let go when something isn't meant for you. You're not cold, you're composed. You're not distant, you're disciplined. You're not heartless, you're in control of your heart. And that control, that discipline, and that's the real tragedy. Because when you're emotionally detached, you don't play the same game anymore. You don't respond to mind games, you don't engage in petty arguments, and you don't let your peace be disturbed by someone else's mood swings. You become the constant in a world full of chaos, the eye of the storm, the calm in her emotional whirlwind. And that calmness is magnetic, because most people, especially women who are used to emotionally reactive men, don't know how to handle a man who won't be baited. A man who listens without reacting, a man who doesn't fall apart just because she's pulling away for a moment. That's when she starts feeling something she didn't expect. Pressure, not the kind of pressure that suffocates, but the kind that wakes her up. The pressure to meet you at your level, to stop playing games, to bring something real. Because now, she realizes you're not going to emotionally break down and chase her just because she's being distant or cold. She realizes that you're perfectly fine with or without her, and that realization is powerful. It shifts the dynamic completely. Suddenly, she's not in control anymore. You are. Emotional detachment is not about shutting yourself off from love or connection. It's about filtering what gets your energy. It's about being able to care deeply while also knowing when to walk away. It's about setting emotional boundaries that protect your peace and preserve your self-respect. Because when you give away your emotions too easily, too quickly, you're giving away your power. You're telling her that your state of mind depends on her mood, her decisions, her validation. But when you're emotionally detached, your mind becomes your own. Your heart is guided by logic and clarity, not impulse and fear. That level of self-mastery doesn't just make her respect you, it makes her rethink everything she thought she knew about you. People respect boundaries they can't cross. It's not about being harsh or aggressive. It's about making it clear where the line is and what happens when it's crossed. In relationships, especially romantic ones, boundaries aren't just helpful, they're essential. When a woman sees that you are a man with standards, a man who doesn't tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional manipulation, it shifts her entire perception of you. Because most men either don't have boundaries, or they allow those boundaries to be bent over time in the name of attraction, fear of loss, or emotional neediness. But when your boundaries are firm, silent, and calmly enforced, it communicates strength. It says you know your worth. It says you're not here to be tested, you're here to be respected. The truth is, people naturally push boundaries. Not always intentionally, but they do it to see how far they can go, how much control they have, how much room you'll give them. It's human psychology. So when you allow things like being spoken to disrespectfully, being ignored for days, being constantly compared to others, or being used as emotional backup without standing up for yourself or stepping back, you're training her to see you as someone who can be stepped on. You're teaching her that your line moves depending on how badly you want her. And once she senses that, the respect starts to fade, because love without respect doesn't last. Attraction without boundaries turns into contempt. A boundary isn't something you announce, it's something you live. It's in how you react when you're tested. It's in the way you stay calm but distant when she disrespects your time. It's in the way you don't beg for love, Don't argue for attention. Don't compete for validation. You simply remove yourself. You simply step back. You don't need to yell, explain, or justify. Your silence and absence become the consequence. And that consequence teaches more than any conversation ever could. Women are drawn to masculine energy that feels secure. Security isn't just about finances or protection. It's about emotional security, too. A man who has boundaries creates that. He makes her feel like he won't fall apart if she pulls away. He makes her feel like he won't allow himself to be dragged into emotional chaos. He shows her that he can be loving but not a pushover, available but not desperate, caring but not clingy. That duality is powerful. It builds trust. It builds attraction. Because now she knows that if she crosses a line, there will be a cost. Not out of punishment, but out of self-respect. You can't teach someone how to love you by allowing them to mistreat you. Every time you let something slide that bothers you, every time you bite your tongue just to keep the peace, every time you tolerate behavior that makes you feel small, you chip away at your own identity, and over time, she doesn't even recognize the man she was once attracted to, because he's become reactive, weak, apologetic, always trying to adjust himself to keep her around. But when you stay firm, when your standards are rooted in self-worth, when you don't tolerate what violates your peace, you become rare. You become unforgettable, you stand out. The more consistent you are with your boundaries, the more she realizes that being with you is a privilege, not a right. That she has to rise to meet your level, that she can't manipulate, control, or emotionally dictate the flow of the relationship. And in that space, she finds herself respecting you more. She finds herself wanting to earn your attention again. Because now you've flipped the script. You're not just a man hoping to be loved. You're a man who knows exactly what kind of love he allows into his life. Scarcity breeds desire. It's one of the most powerful psychological truths when it comes to attraction and influence. The less available something is, the more people want it. The more common and easy it becomes, the faster it loses its perceived value. This applies to everything: luxury items, opportunities, time, energy, and especially people. When you make yourself too available, when you're always just one text away, one call away, always ready to cancel your plans to be there, you strip away the element of rarity. You become expected, not desired, familiar, not exciting, and in relationships, once someone stops seeing you as rare, they stop chasing. They stop fearing your loss because they assume your presence is guaranteed. Men often think that being constantly present, constantly available, constantly giving is how they prove their loyalty and love. But what actually happens is they start overwhelming the space. Too much of anything, even love, can become suffocating when there's no room to breathe, to wonder, to miss, to desire. When a woman knows that no matter how she acts, you'll still call, still show up, still give, still care with the same intensity, she stops valuing that attention. Not out of cruelty, but out of human nature, we're drawn to what feels earned, not what's handed to us on demand. Creating scarcity doesn't mean disappearing or playing games. It means being intentional with where you place your focus and energy. It means having your own life that doesn't revolve around her. It means being passionate about your work, your goals, your health, your purpose, so much so that your attention becomes a gift, not an expectation. When a man lives in such a way that his time and emotional availability are limited, it creates an aura around him. He no longer feels like someone trying to be chosen. He feels like someone who chooses. That energy is undeniable. That energy triggers curiosity. It makes her wonder where you are, what you're thinking, why you haven't reached out first. That wondering is the seed of desire. The irony is, the less you try to impress her with your constant presence, the more impressive you become. When you're not flooding her with calls, checking her every move, validating her constantly, you begin to occupy her mind in a deeper way. She starts to replay your last conversation. She notices the pause in your attention. She starts to feel your absence. And that absence speaks louder than any compliment or gift, because now she's not sure if she still has your full focus. Now she has to earn it again. Scarcity forces people to appreciate what they once took for granted. It makes them reevaluate how much effort they're putting in. It brings balance back into the dynamic. When you stop giving out your time, energy, and emotions like they are unlimited resources, people begin to see them as valuable. They realize you're not just emotionally available on demand. You have boundaries, a life, a sense of self that doesn't depend on someone else's presence. That realization creates respect, and respect fuels deeper attraction than neediness ever could. Most men lose their edge because they overextend. They want to be liked so badly that they forget how valuable their presence is. They ignore their own priorities just to maintain someone else's comfort. But a man who is slightly unavailable, not in a manipulative way, but in a purpose-driven way, becomes unforgettable. He's not always texting good morning. He's not always checking in. He's not always showing up just because she asks. And that unpredictability is powerful. It keeps her on her toes. It reminds her that your attention is not guaranteed, it's earned. Women don't fall for the loudest man in the room. They fall for the one whose silence makes them think. The man who doesn't feel the need to constantly explain himself, who isn't always trying to prove his value with words, who can sit in silence and still make his presence felt. That kind of energy is rare, and rare energy draws people in. In a world where most people are constantly talking, posting, explaining, and reacting, silence becomes powerful. It's not just about being quiet, it's about being composed, about letting your energy speak louder than your voice, about letting your restraint create mystery. When you speak less, people start to wonder more. They start filling in the gaps with their own curiosity. And curiosity is one of the strongest drivers of attraction. When she doesn't know what you're thinking, when you don't react emotionally to everything, when you don't rush to answer every message or explain every action, she starts trying to figure you out. That act of trying, of wondering, of analyzing brings her emotionally closer. She becomes engaged, not because you're chasing her, but because you're making her mind chase you. And that chase doesn't begin with attention. It begins with silence. A man who knows his value doesn't need to broadcast it. He doesn't need to constantly remind someone what he brings to the table. He just brings it effortlessly, without performance. He listens more than he speaks. He watches more than he reacts. He's aware of what's happening around him, but he doesn't feel the urge to constantly insert himself. That kind of energy is magnetic because it gives people space to feel you rather than just hear you. It gives her the chance to miss you, to imagine you, to lean in instead of pulling away. Women are emotional and intuitive. They pick up on subtle shifts in energy. When a man is calm, quiet, and grounded, it doesn't go unnoticed. It actually heightens his presence. Every time you say less, every time you delay a response, every time you choose to observe instead of argue, you're exercising control. And control builds intrigue. It makes her ask questions in her own mind. Is he losing interest? Is he thinking about something else? Why doesn't he react the way other men do? That uncertainty, that psychological tension, triggers her need to connect with you more. The loud, overly expressive man may win attention for a moment, but it fades. The silent, composed man lives in her head long after he's gone. Because she never fully figured him out, she's not sure what he meant. She's not sure what he felt. And that uncertainty becomes obsession. She starts paying attention to your smallest actions. She notices when you're slightly colder, when you delay a message, when you end a call first. That's not because you're playing games. It's because your energy isn't desperate. You've made it clear that your silence isn't emptiness, it's confidence. A man who doesn't need to be seen all the time is often the one people can't stop watching, the one who makes people feel something without saying much, the one whose calmness disrupts her emotional patterns, the one whose detachment makes her question her own reactions. Silence gives her space to feel the depth of your presence. It forces her to evaluate your value, not based on how often you speak, but on how deeply she feels when you don't. She starts associating your absence with meaning. Your lack of words becomes a message. And that message is this: you're not trying to impress her, you're not chasing her approval, you're not afraid to be misunderstood. You're a man who understands that mystery fuels interest and that silence, when used with intention, is louder than any words you could ever say. Fear of loss is more powerful than the promise of gain. It's one of the deepest psychological drivers in human behavior. People don't change because they're offered more, they change when they realize what they could lose. When it comes to relationships, this principle plays a massive role. A woman might appreciate you, admire you, enjoy your presence, but that alone isn't what keeps her emotionally invested. What makes her truly lock in mentally, emotionally, and physically is the realization that she could lose you. That you're not permanently available. That your love, attention, and loyalty are not unconditional rewards for her presence. They are earned and sustained through mutual respect, effort, and emotional investment. Most men are afraid to trigger that fear in a woman. They think if they pull back, she'll walk away. If they don't respond fast enough, she'll lose interest. If they stop being constantly available, she'll replace them. That mindset is exactly what makes them replaceable. When you're always there, always responding, always chasing, always giving without any sense of self-restraint, she has no reason to fear your loss. She knows you're not going anywhere, no matter how she acts, and that certainty kills desire. Desire lives in uncertainty. In tension, in the space between effort and mystery, a woman who knows you'll tolerate her mood swings, her coldness, her games, her disrespect without consequence, loses the psychological tension that keeps her emotionally connected. It's not about being mean or manipulative. It's about being a man who knows what he brings and refuses to stay where he's not respected. That quiet confidence, that unspoken standard, triggers something deep, because now you're not just another man trying to keep her, you're a man she could actually lose. And that changes the entire dynamic. When she starts to sense that you won't stay if the energy shifts, that you won't keep giving if she stops reciprocating, that you're capable of walking away with grace and not bitterness, she begins to reevaluate everything. She starts to question whether she's bringing enough to the table, whether she's putting in enough effort, whether she's showing up in a way that would make a man like you want to stay. That self-reflection is healthy. It creates alignment. It makes her step out of complacency and start matching your energy. Fear of losing you doesn't come from threats or ultimatums. It comes from your actions, from the way you calmly remove yourself when the respect fades, from the way you protect your peace instead of trying to fix every emotional mess, from the way you stop responding to breadcrumbs and only give energy where it's returned. That's how you teach her your value, not through words, but through what you tolerate. And when you tolerate less, you're valued more. She will start to feel the shift, not immediately, but over time. When she texts and you don't jump to reply, when she cancels plans and you don't try to reschedule, when she pulls back and you don't chase, that distance speaks volumes. It's not punishment, it's presence control. It's emotional discipline, and it creates the space for her to miss you, to feel the absence of your presence, to realize that having you was never guaranteed, and that keeping you requires effort, not entitlement. When a woman realizes that the man in front of her is not afraid of walking away, that he doesn't need her to feel whole, that he would rather be alone than be disrespected, her entire approach shifts. She becomes more careful with her words, more intentional with her actions, more consistent in how she shows up. Because now there's something to lose. And in that fear of loss, attraction is not only reignited, it's reinforced with depth, respect, and clarity. Detachment is the ultimate display of emotional control. It doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging. It means your sense of peace, confidence, and value doesn't rise and fall based on someone else's attention or affection. In relationships, especially when trying to create deep emotional impact, the person who is less attached often holds more influence. That doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being rooted in yourself. It means being able to love fully without losing yourself in that love. Because when you are too attached to an outcome, to a person, to their validation, you start moving from a place of fear, not power. Attachment creates anxiety. It creates overthinking, jealousy, insecurity. It makes you constantly analyze what they said, what they didn't say, why they haven't replied, what they're feeling, where they are. That mental spiral doesn't come from love. It comes from fear. Fear that if you're not enough, you'll be abandoned. Fear that if you don't keep showing up, they'll forget you. Fear that if you're not always available, you'll be replaced. But when you step back into detachment, into your center, you realize none of that matters as much as your peace. You realize that real power is found in walking away from what disturbs your peace, even if you love it. A woman can feel the difference between a man who desires her and a man who needs her. Neediness repels. Desire without need attracts, because when you don't need her to be okay, she senses freedom in your energy. She doesn't feel pressured. She doesn't feel suffocated. Instead, she feels drawn in, because now your presence becomes a choice, not a demand. She knows you enjoy her, but you won't fall apart without her. That kind of energy is rare, and rare energy makes people feel challenged. It makes them step up. It makes them value your presence because it's not fueled by desperation. Detachment allows you to operate from logic, not emotion. When things shift in a relationship, when she starts pulling away, playing games, becoming distant, most men react emotionally. They start chasing, over-explaining, trying harder to win her back. That only reinforces the power imbalance. But when you're detached, you don't react. You observe. You let her show you who she is without interference. You give her the space to either correct the behavior or lose access to your energy. That calmness, that refusal to engage in emotional chaos, is deeply attractive. Because it shows you're not reacting to her, you're responding to your own standards. The most powerful position in any dynamic is being okay with whatever happens. When you know that whether she stays or leaves, you'll be fine, you become emotionally untouchable. You stop negotiating your worth, you stop trying to earn love, you start choosing yourself, and in that space, people either match your energy or they disappear. And both outcomes are wins, because you're no longer chasing validation, you're living in your truth. Detachment also creates magnetism. When you're not obsessed with where things are going, she starts wondering where you stand. She starts trying to decode your silence, trying to figure out what's going on in your mind. You become a mystery, and mystery is one of the strongest psychological triggers of desire. When she can't fully read you, she can't predict you, and when she can't predict you, she has to stay mentally engaged. That mental engagement deepens emotional connection because now she's investing. She's thinking, reflecting, wondering. And in that wondering, you become more valuable. When you master detachment, you stop forcing things. You stop chasing what isn't flowing. You start attracting from a place of calm, focused intention. And in that energy, the right people recognize your worth, and the wrong ones remove themselves without you lifting a finger. Detachment isn't about being aloof. It's about being so centered in who you are that you don't need external validation to feel whole. It's about trusting that what's meant for you will stay and what isn't will leave, and either way, you remain grounded. When you understand the psychology behind fear of loss, scarcity, silence, and detachment, you stop playing the game like everyone else. You stop overgiving, overchasing, and overexplaining. You stop trying to convince someone of your worth, and instead, you become someone whose worth is felt in your absence. The moment you pull your energy back, not out of manipulation, but out of self-respect, you shift the entire dynamic. You remind her that your presence is not guaranteed, that your attention is earned, that your peace comes first. And in that energy, you become the man who doesn't just attract her, but the one she's afraid to lose. Not because you threatened to walk away, but because you proved you could.